Hello and welcome to the Ovary Jones Show. If you too heard those words, you've got cancer, this is the place to be. I'm your host, Melanie Holster, survivor and author of Becoming Ovary Jones and founder of Together We Box. And one of the things that I found out through my cancer journey is we are exposed to a lot of toxins. We're either breathing them, we're absorbing them through our skin, or we're eating them. So today I wanted to talk to a health coach and get to the bottom of what we are consuming and how can we help our doctors out by cleaning up our diet a little bit and see if we can actually reduce that inflammation. So we're going to be talking to Janet Frank, who has a PhD in clinical community psychology, and she is an ADAPT certified functional health coach. So Janet Frank, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. So,
Sure.
Janet, what happened to the food pyramid that I learned everything all about when I was growing up?
Well, at the risk of alienating half of or all of the United States government, you can probably discard most of
Ah,
it.
I studied, I learned, I like my bread.
Most people do. Most people do.
So, tell me first of all, what is a adapt certified functional health coach?
And well done. It's ADAPT Certified Functional Health Coach. ADAPT is just the name of the program by Chris Kresser, who is a globally known functional medicine practitioner. Just to help you with the terminology, functional medicine practitioners are looking at the root cause of an illness as opposed to a more conventional medical practitioner. And I'm speaking in generalities, but to give you an example, if you had a migraine, and you went to a conventional medical practitioner, they're going to give you medication to help you get rid of the pain from the migraine. If you take a migraine to a functional medicine practitioner, they're going to say, let's look at every aspect of your life that we can: diet, stress, toxins, leisure time, social support. Let's see if we can, posture. Let's see if we can figure out what's causing the migraines so we can either get rid of them or at least lessen their intensity, their severity, their frequency. So it's getting at the root cause. So Chris Kresser has a functional health coach certification called ADAPT, and I am recently ADAPT certified and planning to sit for national board certification next summer. So
Very
moving
good.
along.
Very good. So, tell me a little bit about your personal journey. What got you into all of this? Why are you so
Mm.
interested in this?
Well, to go back to your first question, I was living my life blissfully trying to adhere to the food pyramid and was somewhere in my mid 30s and just realized I don't have a primary care physician and I should probably get established with somebody. And I'd been waiting to lose that last 10 pounds, which I finally acknowledged was never going to happen. So let me just go get established. And she picked up on some funny thyroid labs and she pointed out a couple of things that were suspect. She said, here's what I suggest. I'm going to give you these few books to read. Go home and read them. And if you feel like you want to come back for further testing after this, then come back. And I go home and I read the books and realize that I have been just accepting a lot of really disruptive and uncomfortable and miserable symptoms as normal. And I was undergoing at the time some pretty considerable life stressors and was just kind of chalking it all up to stress. But I remember reading these books and she had said, I think 12 weeks back for more, it was antibody testing that she wanted to do. And I was back in there in 4 weeks saying, let's do the testing. And I was diagnosed at that point with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition, which basically means your body produces antibodies which attack the thyroid. So then it's not functioning optimally. And the antibody levels didn't even register a number. They just came back saying greater than 1,000, which is, typically you want them 50 or less to be considered not having any disease. So I was just ragingly symptomatic, even though the original TSH, which is what people typically look at for thyroid numbers, was still within the normal range. So I got that treated, which is just handled with medication, or so I thought at the time. And then within 3 months, I'm back in her office trying to unravel some horrific, mostly upper GI symptoms, a lot of really bad heartburn, a lot of bloating, like eating 3 bites and feeling really full. And that, I mean, I had an endoscopy, I had a gastric motility study, I had an abdominal ultrasound. Somewhere along the way, I had a barium swallow. I had a bunch of tests over the next, I think it was probably 6 years, and symptoms would kind of come and go, and then they just came and stayed and got ferociously worse. So I had a sore throat all the time from heartburn, and it got to the point where there was so much inflammation, I don't know if you can see, kind of just upper GI, that I was having trouble really taking a deep breath. And at that point I got scared, and I figured I'm going to get esophageal cancer and die if I don't figure out what this is. And finally, just surfing around on the internet about heartburn, found something that suggested a link to gluten. So I took it back to my doctor and I said, could this be an issue with gluten? She almost went like this. And again, interestingly, with the test results, she said, I want you to take a stool test. It's new, it's a little controversial, but many people are believing, since it's closer to the source, which is your gut, you're going to get more valid results. So those came back positive for antibodies to gluten. And the only remedy for that is a 100% gluten-free diet. And then just for fun, we did the conventional lab work for antibodies to gluten, and they all came back within normal limits. But I know from, I don't know if people are too terribly scientific, but an AB trial is where you take it out, you put it in, you take it out, you put it in, gauge how you feel. There's no question that it was gluten. And then just from there, to figure out how to eat gluten-free, because gluten is in everything. The next, I mean, it's an ongoing journey, but the next, I don't know, 15 years or so have all been about figuring out, what does my body tolerate? What does it not tolerate? What do I need to do? What do I need to eat? Under what circumstances? Under what stress? Under what everything do I feel best? And then just trying to live that. But back to what you were saying when you introduced the podcast, a lot of this stuff has to do with managing inflammation in the body, because that's what a gluten intolerance, or the symptoms, are all about. That's what any autoimmune condition is about, is inflammation. That's the root of just about all chronic disease, is inflammation. So I left psychology practice just because I was feeling so poorly, and dealing with so much stress. I really just couldn't be on at work and on at home where I was needed and had a lot of obligations. So that led to about a 14-year detour in sales, which is where you and I became connected. But then my COVID epiphany, like so many people have had them, is just that I really belong in a helping profession. So I have this background in psychology, I have this personal passion for health, and then I discovered that health coaching, somewhere in that gap, had emerged as this legitimate profession. So here I am.
Very cool. Very cool. So, for those of us who have heard those words, you've got cancer, and we're trying to figure out how can we make some positive changes and maybe help our doctors out a little bit and clean up our environment a little bit, what would you recommend as a health coach, some steps that we can start to take to try and feel a little bit better? And let me first throw a disclaimer out. If you are in chemo, which I was, sometimes you got to be able to eat whatever you can tolerate. And so this might not be the time, but
Totally agree. Exactly.
right. But at some point, we typically are like, okay, what can we do to help our doctors out and try and live a little bit healthier in hopes that this cancer doesn't return?
Right. I love how you frame that in terms of how can I help my doctor out. I love that. And I'm really glad that you threw out that disclaimer, because I was going to, if you didn't. Like, we're talking about potentially, for some people, major life changes, major dietary changes. If you can barely get out of bed because of exhaustion or nausea or whatever other side effects, it's probably not the time. So you do what you can and you control the controllables. But if, I'm thinking the viewers of your podcast are going to encompass anyone on the spectrum of cancer, people who want to prevent cancer, people who are undergoing treatment for cancer, people who have completed treatment for cancer and want to live optimally. So this could apply to anyone. Um, you and I could have 3 podcasts on the kinds of things that you can do to minimize toxins and things that cause inflammation in your body. But I think just for the sake of time, there are 3 main things in your diet, and we may not even get to all 3 of these today, that people want to be looking at trying to eliminate just to take away that inflammatory load, because inflammation left unchecked is what leads to chronic disease, whether it's cancer, whether it's some kind of autoimmune disorder, whether it's heart disease. Inflammation is underneath all of that. But the 3 things to pay the most attention to, and again, there's plenty of others, would be gluten, sugar, and inflammatory oils or industrial seed oils, which most people do exactly what you're doing. And we may not even get that, may be another podcast, but those are the top 3.
So I know gluten is associated with celiac disease, or from what I've read a little bit. And, we keep hearing it's almost like a buzzword anymore. Gluten, gluten, gluten. We hear it all the time. Gluten free this, gluten.
Yeah.
How do we start to maybe not eliminate completely or take the first steps? And why should we,
Right. I was going to say the first step is understanding what it is, where it is, and why it's important to consider removing it from your diet. First off, it's not a fad. And there are people who experiment with going gluten-free because they think it's a form of being low carb and they think they're going to lose weight. So they'll go to a restaurant and they'll say to the waiter, "Oh, I can't have anything with gluten," and then they'll nibble on the bread, which really does a tremendous disservice to people who need to be 100% gluten-free for health reasons. So it is a protein that's found in wheat, barley, and rye. The barley and the rye are, less frequent, but like beer is made from barley, that's hops. So gratefully, there's lots of gluten-free beers if that's something you don't want to give up. But it's a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. So the most obvious offenders are your breads, your pastas, your cereals, your crackers, almost anything packaged that comes in plastic or comes in a box probably has gluten in it somewhere. But at least in the beginning, it's a pretty big learning curve because it's also in things like licorice. The next time you're looking at a box of Twizzlers, check it out. There's wheat in the ingredients. Soy sauce, there's wheat. Usually, I think there's 1 or 2 brands that don't have any, and they make all kinds of gluten-free soy sauce. But if you look at most brands, wheat is right there. And it's like, you just have to learn this stuff over time. But the reason you should care, I just wrote a blog post about this that's going to be published online with another company fairly soon. And I called it, "What is celiac disease and why should I care?" Celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where the body has an intolerance to gluten. And what happens there is our intestines are lined with villi, which are like finger-like projections, which reach out and grab the nutrients for our bodies to absorb. What happens with celiac disease is those become flattened. So they just can't do their work. So if you're not absorbing nutrients, you are going to have anemia because you're not getting any iron, which means you're going to be really tired and really short of breath, among other things. You're going to lose bone density, which, that leaves you at risk for osteoporosis. You're going to be malnourished. And that in and of itself, people don't realize that we need nutrients for our bodies to function optimally. So you're going to be malnourished, which can lead to a whole host of problems. But the reason that people want to pay attention to this is that there was a landmark study many years ago that estimated that about 1 in 133 people have celiac disease. If you think about that from any other disease standpoint, that is a disease of epic proportions. And what I say to people who think, well, that's 1 in 133, I'll take my chances. But if you flip that around, and I told you that you had a 1 in 133 chance of winning a $10 million lottery, how many tickets would you buy?
A lot.
A lot, exactly. So those are just crazy, crazy odds of you or someone you know having celiac disease. So it is genetic. You do have to have one of a couple of genes to have celiac disease. So there are ways for people to find out. But And we'll go into why this is so dangerous if you have one of these forms of intolerances. But the medical profession is now acknowledging that non-celiac gluten sensitivity is also a thing. So they're starting to suspect that this is also autoimmune in origin, but just works through some different mechanisms, some different route than celiac disease. They don't understand it's not associated with the celiac genes, but the underlying result of both of these gluten intolerances is inflammation. Because what happens is, like 80% of our immune system is in our gut. And for the sake of education, your gut is anything from the opening of your mouth to your anus and everything in between. So a lot of what we're talking about happens here in your intestines. What happens when you have inflammation, when you have something called leaky gut, which is what all of this inflammation leads to, is you think about the walls of your intestines are supposed to be pretty tight. And what happens is with this kind of inflammation, with these disorders, those walls become weakened. So everything that's waste and everything that's toxins that's supposed to leave our bodies can leak out of those intestinal walls. And once it gets into your bloodstream, it wreaks havoc on your body. So, I have a list here because I don't even trust myself to remember to say it outright. But when you think about some of the diseases that celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity are associated with, it's ridiculous. Diabetes, multiple sclerosis, thyroid disorders, heart disease, osteoporosis, depression, ADHD, arthritis, migraines, allergies, asthma, obesity, hello, cancer's in there. So, Chris Kresser, whose ADAPT training I took, is of the opinion that everyone should at least try a 60-day trial of being 100% gluten-free. And that's tricky to do. And that's one of the places that health coaches can help you navigate and see how you feel. Because what happens is a lot of the time, there are symptoms that go away and people have just attributed that to, oh, I'm getting older. Oh, I'm stressed. They'll report that their acne clears up, their heartburn goes away, their joints don't ache as much. I had all those upper GI symptoms. I was also at the risk of, too much information on a podcast, very gassy, sometimes constipated. It's nasty. But I also, eventually it morphed into really terrible joint pain. I am a pretzel. At 53, I can still do a split and a back bend, but my joints hurt so badly at that time. I couldn't even lie on my back and hug my knees to my chest, which for most people is a pretty comfortable position to be in. It was awful. I don't remember where I was going with that, but just talking about the inflammation associated with this. This is the reason everyone should at least consider a trial of being gluten-free.
So if somebody wanted to actually try that, I'm overwhelmed just hearing all of that. And of course, we were all raised on the pyramid, and let's face it, you don't get these chubby cheeks without some nice pasta and some bread. I can't even imagine giving up my pasta and my bread. How in the world would I even start to go, especially 60 days? But, if I wanted to start weaning myself off of glutens to see how I felt, how do I begin?
There are scads of resources. And part of it is also giving yourself some grace. You may make a mistake. You may decide, I want to start the clock over knowing that you've made a mistake. It's entirely up to the individual, and it really depends. But particularly if you're having symptoms, particularly if you know that some of this runs in your family, particularly if you have cancer and you're really motivated to, to take as many toxins and inflammatory things out of your life and your diet as you can. Part of what a health coach is going to work with you on first is really getting you connected to, why do I want to do this? Because when we're connected to our why, it's going to be a lot easier to get through the things that are tough. So if you have really compelling, solid, important, powerful reasons for why you want to do this, first of all, it's a lot easier to keep your eye on the prize. Most people would start with just eliminating the basics, which are the breads, the pastas. But when you think about what that leaves, especially if you eat meat, you can subsist on meats, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. When you throw spices into that mix, that's mostly how I eat. I eat very little dairy. I don't obviously eat any breads at all. I am mostly grain free. So even the gluten free stuff, I don't eat much rice. I don't eat much corn because there is some research that's suggesting that these things are inflammatory as well, particularly for people with autoimmune conditions. So I eat within a really limited pool of ingredients. And I would say I have more flavor and more variety than most people have in their diets, but it's a learning curve.
Yeah.
So there's the gluten intolerance group, which is just at gluten.org, which has tons of resources. There are all kinds of celiac disease organizations. I want to say just celiac.org, but a quick Google search for, gluten-free diet support or celiac organizations, gluten intolerance group, you'll find all of this stuff. You can get so much stuff in the mail in terms of informational packets. It's a learning curve. You'll make mistakes, but with a little bit of reading and a little bit of study and potentially some help with a health coach or a support group in your area, because often those exist, it's totally doable. It seems daunting to somebody who doesn't know how to eat differently, but we all do what we know how to do
Right.
until somebody teaches us how to do it differently.
Right. I will say, for those of us who have gone through a cancer journey or in the midst of a cancer journey, so many of the guests that I interview on this show talk about cancer being their wake up call or the catalyst that caused them to make different decisions. And so I know in my journey, this definitely was the case, and I certainly tried to clean up my environment and made some different health decisions. And for me, it was NCMP, Nick Caleb Mackenzie Paisley. That's my family. That's my why, and why I want to
Mm-hmm.
do what I can to be healthy and stick around. And so, it is a great time to start making some changes. So
Yeah.
that's gluten.
Yep.
And I was talking to somebody recently, and he kept telling me, when you know better, then you got to do better. So once we start
Mm.
waking up to some of these things, then we have to start making some changes, right? We have to.
That's it. This is why I'm not just gluten free, because the more you learn, the more you learn, the more you learn. And it's like, oh gosh, I shouldn't be eating this or this or this or this or this. And it's taken, 15 years for me to arrive where I am today. And I still occasionally realize, oops, ate too much of that. I don't feel so good. Our bodies aren't static, but I definitely want to remind people, grace for yourselves. This is a huge learning curve, and I didn't flip this switch overnight. Gluten was overnight. I would have given my left arm to get rid of the symptoms.
Right.
But everything else was just trial and error. And as I learned more, um, I've changed the kind of meat that I eat. I try not to eat any conventionally raised meat anymore and opt for grass fed and pasture raised organic. And, another podcast, I can give you
Right.
the reasons for those. I've cut out most grains, and another podcast, I can give you the reasons for those. I'm not entirely sugar free, but I'm really careful about how much refined sugar or sweeteners of any kind that I take in.
Well, just like wheat, sugar's in everything too.
It is. And just like weed, it hides under all kinds of other names.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Um, yeah. But, what people don't realize is that sugar, and again, it's another list I couldn't even give you without writing it down. It's not just that sugar makes you fat. And that's what most people think. Oh, I need to quit sugar. It makes me fat. It's way more serious than that. Suppresses the immune system, especially in the age of COVID. Do you really want to suppress the immune system? Causes imbalances of important minerals we need for health. And again, people tend to underestimate how much we really need proper nutrition. We don't have all these studies on vitamin C, D, E, K, all of these things for no reason. We need these things. Um, Decreases tissue elasticity and function. So pain and injury, anyone? I mean, who wants that?
Right.
Causes tooth decay. Okay, that's a duh. We all know that. Contributes to depression and other mood disorders. Again, this is so much more than just making you fat. And hello, I have this italicized, increases breast cancer risk. And I don't know about other cancers, but I can't see how not. But what I've seen in the literature is increases breast cancer risk. So sugar is bad. It's bad.
Right.
And we're not talking about the naturally occurring stuff in fruit. Unless you have some severe issue with blood sugar, if you're really just a big time diabetic or you have massive amounts of weight to lose, you can eat 3 to 5 pieces of fruit a day with no problem. It's like the naturally occurring stuff is no big deal. It's when you start, and it hides in so many places. I don't even have a list, I don't think, but high fructose corn syrup is a big offender. But then you see things like maltodextrin and dextrose and all of these other crazy, anything on a label that you don't know what it is or know how to pronounce, chances are it's some derivative of sugar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that somebody, educated me, and when you know better, you got to do better, right? Is to try to shop the perimeters of the grocery store and stay away from everything that comes in boxes, everything that's highly processed. Um, so let's talk a little bit about your last one, which was industrial seed oil, because I looked at you like you were crazy and I don't really understand what that means. So tell
Yeah.
us about that.
Yeah. This is the one where people a lot of times have the least knowledge. So, um, industrial seed oils are made from the seeds of plants. So you think cotton, you think soybean, you think sunflower, safflower, corn. We think, well, these are things that grow, so they got to be healthy for me, right? No, 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 no. So you think about it, these are used in a number of manufactured products like candles. Again, I have so many lists, I don't have it committed to memory. Candles, soaps, perfumes, lubricants, fuel. If you think biodiesel, that's an industrial seed oil. Do you want to run on the same thing that an engine's running on? So their use in so many manufacturing applications is why they're referred to as industrial seed oils, because they're made in factories. A lot of times they're used in factories, not what you want to be eating, but they're marketed as heart healthy. And this is where, you know, thank you, food pyramid. So without getting too heavy into the science, there are two kinds of there are two major kinds of fats that our body needs: omega 3s and omega 6s. The omega 3s are what you find in some of the fish are touted as some of the fatty, healthier fish. So salmon, sardines, mackerel, some of those fish that people never want to eat. But those are the ones that contain these omega 3s. Omega 6s, to an extent, are found in things like nuts and seeds, which are okay and fine and healthy to eat in moderation. But there is a ratio of omega 3 to omega 6 that we want to keep in our body. A little heavier on the 3s, a little lighter on the 6s. And those industrial seed oils bump that ratio to like 6s way like off the chart, off the screen, and keeps the 3s down here. And again, that kind of imbalance in your body is something that leads to chronic inflammation, which leads to disease. It's a little sciencey, but they contain high amounts of something known as linoleic acid. And Chris Kresser has written in a couple of places that we may be getting up to 10 times more of that than we're actually genetically designed to handle or that we need.
Wow.
Just think of anything that's that out of whack.
Right.
Just
So,
can't possibly run.
right. So the interesting thing, you mentioned soy candles or candles, and my daughter Kenzie Holscher is she runs Together We Box, and so we send out boxes of care packages for cancer patients, and that's the one thing that she and I have talked about a lot, because it'd be so easy. Everybody loves a really good smelling candle, but we want to make sure that we're being careful about the things that we're sending out. We don't want to cause any damage or anything like that. So even candles, even the things that seem so innocuous, seem so, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And
crazy.
right. And I'm not an expert in the candle manufacturing. I know like beeswax candles are purported to be a little cleaner than just some of the industrial made ones. But anything that smells really good but doesn't occur naturally in nature, that was redundant, doesn't occur naturally in nature, you want to be suspect of. Cavemen, to make it really basic, didn't have air fresheners. And what we're learning about those, and this may be another podcast, is those can be big time endocrine disruptors. And endocrine refers to anything in your body related to hormones. And again, when things are way out of whack in your body, something's going to go awry.
This can be a little overwhelming because oil, that's what we use on our salads, and salads are healthy, right? So if we're trying to avoid industrial seed oil, what are we going to do for our salads?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So thank you for bringing that up. What you're doing is just shrinking the pool of oils that you want to choose from. A good quality olive oil is believed to be nutritious, polyphenols, chemical that's really good for you in a nutshell. Be careful, because if there's something that's BOGO on the supermarket shelf, it's probably not a pure, clean olive oil. Those are often adulterated with other kinds of oils. And one of the other issues with these industrial seed oils is they oxidize really easily. So when rust flakes off a car, that's an oxidative process. Just think about that happening inside your body. Yeah, your face is saying it all. So you want to find a good quality olive oil. Coconut oil, and this is, again, possibly for some other podcasts, saturated fat is not believed to be quite the demon that it's been made out to be by the government, by lots of the scientists. So in moderation, coconut oil can be okay. Avocado oil is a good one. Some of the nut oils can be okay in moderation. Again, you're still watching that omega-3, omega-6 ratio, but walnut, almond oil, some people like. But generally, olive and avocado and the coconut oils are the ones that you want to gravitate towards. So I can give you more information some other time if you wish, but there's lots of alternatives. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for asking that.
This has been so informative, and you're right. I think need to do this about 5 more times, maybe. Or you could start a podcast too. That would be good too.
I'll leave that to you.
Well, if somebody would like more information, is there a way that they could get a hold of you?
Sure. Simplest way, email is just janetfrankcoaching@gmail.com. I do have a website, which is just janetfrankcoaching.com, and there's a way to contact me through the website. And I'm on LinkedIn, so if anybody wants to look me up there, that's fine too.
Absolutely. Well, make sure you look up Janet Frank and follow her, and you can get more of this incredible, I just think there's just so much that we can learn. And we have the standard American diet, sad, very sad.
Exactly.
And once we know better, we have to do better. And so sometimes, and this is, I'm a business coach, so that's why people reach out to me is, they want to do better, and it's hard to do it by ourselves. So if somebody would like some help from Janet to walk alongside and partner up so that you can, clean up your diet and reduce that inflammation, absolutely follow Janet Frank. And Janet, thank you so much for being with me today, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Very good. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So thank you for tuning in, and next week's guest you're absolutely going to love. So make sure you hit the notification bell, subscribe, and like this episode. Please share this episode. We are all about helping cancer patients do a little bit to help themselves through their cancer journey. So please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Tune in next week. I know you're going to love next week's guest.